Good morning, everyone. This is Catrice with 𝐁𝐿𝐴, and today we are disrupting Pensacola. I have Dr. LaTanya White online, and she is going to be talking with everyone today about identity. I'm super excited. Hi, Dr. White. How are you today?
I'm doing good, Catrice, and good morning, everyone, or whatever time it is when you all listen to it, right?
All right, so I'm going to go ahead and let you lead this conversation.
All right. Well, for those that aren't familiar with the work that Catrice and I have been doing together, I'm Dr. LaTanya White. I spent 11 years teaching entrepreneurship at the Florida A&M University in Tallahassee. I was about 4 years into my teaching journey when I was trying to figure out why the enrollment in my entrepreneurship class was so low. So at the time, I want to say FAMU had an on-campus enrollment of close to 10,000 students, in the high 9,000s. The entrepreneurship class that I was teaching was an elective, and I would have 10 or 12, 10, not hundreds of them, 10 or 12 students that would enroll in the entrepreneurship course. And really was trying to figure out what was happening because, let social media tell you, entrepreneurship is the easiest thing. It's going to get you there. Listen, the lies, right?
Straight lies. I know that was a lie. And that's a lie from the pit. Okay, I'm going to leave it there.
Right, but the students didn't know that, so I'm like, well, where is everybody? I did some due diligence and discovered that there was a prerequisite course that a student was required to have taken before they would be eligible to take the entrepreneurship elective. Now, what was even more interesting about that was that particular prerequisite was only a requirement for business students or journalism students. So me and you are the only two in all of these majors that were available to take the prerequisite. That meant that you see your face exactly how your face. That's it.
That makes sense. Okay.
So the challenge, though, right, was that if you were any other major, you wouldn't even see the entrepreneurship class show up as an option for you. So this is probably that first barrier to how can we even see ourselves as entrepreneurs if this isn't an option for me in this space where somebody's paying for me to be here, right? Mm-hmm. So that was one barrier. The second barrier was really, and for those who are educators or have worked in higher ed, or maybe it hadn't been too long since you were a student, that meant a student needed to use 2 electives in order to get into this entrepreneurship class. And ain't nobody doing that.
No, they're trying to graduate. Okay.
Exactly. So a part of what came out of that discovery for me was, I'm an entrepreneur, right? So I went to the curriculum chair and I was just like, can we remove this prerequisite? Like thinking, here's the problem, here's the solution, let's do it. And it don't work like that. It does not work like that.
They gave you a hard no?
I recognize now that I needed to have that experience because I wouldn't be here with you if I hadn't. But so I sent the email to one person, and understanding the politics and bureaucracy that is higher education, he couldn't make that decision by himself. He just happened to be the chair. The entire committee needed to be involved in the discussion. So he replied to me and 25 other people like, this is the way it is. This is the reason that it is. And at the time, the interim dean, who was also copied, you have to copy the leadership, right? Came in and said, basically shut it down. That was where I got the hard no from the interim dean. And his theory or his argument was, we need students to be prepared for the rigor of this type of course, which I respect because it was a 4,000 level course, except there was no introductory level course. Right?
Wait, hold on. Okay. So they have this high level course with no introductory, no 101, anything, but you have to have taken classes beforehand to get to this, but you don't anyway.
Yeah. And so listen, this is where I am. 5, 6, 7 years later, right? Now I can see the bigger picture. The higher level course, an elective course, like let's not forget that it was an elective course. There was also at the time, and this was I want to say this was across the board for most HBCUs. Our PWI counterparts have been moving in a different direction about entrepreneurship education for, a few years ahead of us. But by the time I was having this discussion, entrepreneurship did not have a place in structured education, right? Entrepreneurship or starting a business was basically something you learned on your own. You went to the Small Business Development Center for. If you were near a minority business development agency, if you knew what a chamber was, but it wasn't happening on campus, right?
Right.
So in retrospect, I can see why it was such a disjointed argument that I was making, but that is the experience that pushed me into my graduate degree program. Because I recognized I was just so passionate about it, and I was coming from this very heart-centered place. Catrice, I didn't know how to make a logical argument to these people that, their job is where's the money? We need money to get these learning experiences, to get to the student outcomes, to maintain our accreditation, to get more. You know what I'm saying? I couldn't make those kinds of logical arguments. But that was why I went to my doctoral program, and thank God for it. So as a product of Antioch University, based in Yellow Springs, Ohio. So any Dave Chappelle fans, they know where Yellow Springs, Ohio is.
Okay.
Antioch University has a graduate school of leadership and change. And so it's a social justice leadership program. There were about 31 of us that were brought into my cohort, which was the 17th class. So we're called C17 or cohort 17. So they had, the university has had 17 years of data on how to truly effectuate change. And this is where we get into the identity piece. So our first year of the program, and just for context, when we're talking about social justice leadership and the way that program was designed, everyone was charged with really seeing, first identifying a problem in your community of practice. So there were people from human resources, from finance, from philanthropy. Several of us were in education, in higher ed. And for me, I was in the problem that I had identified was this lack of access, I guess is the best word, to entrepreneurship education at the higher ed level, right?
Before you get into this, let me ask you a quick question, because my mind is blown just a little bit because of the fact that we're always talking about moving forward in some aspects, but when when education itself doesn't know how to help you move forward, that's a problem. And this is why so many of us have struggled when it comes to business, because we'll go to school and we'll take the classes, and then they'll put a barrier, and then we're like, well, I'll just make it myself. I'm going to be honest with you. There was no business class for me. Even when I went to the SBDC, there was no business class for me. I had to learn everything the hard way.
Yeah.
So how do we?
Valid point.
How does that get fixed in the school system? Because I'm sure it's still somewhat of the same way, and it shouldn't be.
So that's a great question. And I ended up having to, and the way our program was designed, we didn't sit in a classroom and take exams like a typical doctoral program does. We had to research. Like, we wrote papers for 3 years until we got to the dissertation phase.
Wow.
So, and you were writing each of those papers through your area of practice, right? Like, what is the problem that you want to solve? So over the course of those 3 years, I had to ask myself that question, like, how did we get here? Why are we still here? And then how do we move forward? And one of the papers that I wrote was on basically the responsibility of HBCU leadership to advance the discussion and infrastructure around entrepreneurship education on their campuses and within their communities. And so a part of research is to really unpack the origin, right? And where my revelation in doing that research, to answer your question, was we have to go back and really think about and acknowledge how HBCUs got started, why HBCUs got started, and who funded them.
Well, we already know who funded them. So
Okay.
Okay. Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. And that's not a put down on HBCUs, but
Yeah.
you know, the whole thing is that a lot of their funding came from others who wanted us to be in specific areas so it can help them.
Exactly. So one of the steps I did in writing that paper, I was trying to find the themes, like what beyond our cultural experiences connected HBCUs, what created the identity of a historically Black college or university. And I looked at the seals. So I think there were 5 or 6 different HBCUs that I looked at, and all of them had something that referred to the hand, right? Because we're coming out of slavery when these HBCUs, or I think maybe going into Reconstruction.
That's when
if I have my right. So, but if you look at the seals, they'll say hand, heart, field, right? So this was the industrial model of education. To your point, we hadn't changed our model of teaching and learning. We're still transferring knowledge through this very industrial era form of teaching. And that's, you have to produce something with your physicality, especially if you're a person of color. It doesn't necessarily amplify the opportunities to establish your intellectual value or develop intellectual property. So understanding that, right, and the scope of, why aren't we talking about entrepreneurship more? It helped me to understand it better and fight a different way.
Okay.
Yeah.
Whew.
And we still hadn't gotten to the identity piece.
Okay, so let's go into, so after saying all of that, because I want to make sure that you get what we need to get out concerning the identity piece. Entrepreneurship. So now that we've learned all of this, are the HBCUs changing their concept?
Yes. And it's such an exciting time to be a witness to it and to be a part of the change. So one of the big points of dissension that several HBCUs have kind of overcome is who owns entrepreneurship? Like, who owns innovation? And a part of historically was this concept or this class, this program needed to be housed somewhere. And typically that would have been in the business school, right? And so that's how I got to the place where the entrepreneurship class I was teaching belonged to the business school. Now, with all of the excitement around racial equity and founders of color, and we're going to do this as restitution, not reparations, restitution, right? Now there's so much more money flowing into entrepreneurship programs that it looks better for, a particular school if the entrepreneurship program is not reporting directly to the provost. Someone wants to claim the money. It's just like with research grants, right? The more grants that your academic unit pulls in, the higher you are received, I think is the term that I'm searching for, right? You become more elite, right? So similarly, things are happening like that with entrepreneurship, but the argument, the data, the outcomes show that the most impact is made through entrepreneurship classes, mentorships, programs, all of that, if the offerings come directly out of the provost's office. So that means there is a budget line that's written into the university for entrepreneurship offerings for any student, not just a business student or not just an engineering student, that kind of thing. So there is some change happening.
Okay. Because so I went to Pensacola State College. So let me just say first, I'm an alumni from Howard University. Okay. I didn't do well at Howard University, but I'm an alumni. So, gotcha. But then I went to Pensacola State College, and I went there and I got my graphic design degree, but it was in graphic design and business management. So I had to take all the business courses, but we never took an entrepreneur course ever. So even with that, I still did not get the courses that I needed to get for entrepreneurship. Everything that I learned, I literally bumped my head several times and had to pay the stupid tax. You know what the stupid tax is? Yeah. And so, but I got it, and I learned that in paying the stupid tax, I can teach other people not to pay the stupid tax. Yeah. So that's where like all my education comes from. But I'm really glad to hear that that is happening. Yeah. So with that being said, let's move into the conversation that you really would like to have. Let's talk about it.
This was context, right? Because what we're about to transition into is really because the identity piece and what came out of my experience with my own struggle and literally identity crisis, it doesn't have as much value without that context.
Okay.
So, the first year of the doctoral program, so we're studying these systems, right? Like, what is the problem that you've identified? But more importantly, what is the system within that problem exists? So we've talked about the system, right? We talked about funding and the founding of HBCUs. That's the system that this problem existed in. On a deeper level, because our program, we would meet, it was considered a low residency program. So that means we would come onto the campus 3 times a year for a week at a time. But in between that, it was self-paced. You're meeting with your advisor, you're meeting with your small groups, you're reading, you're writing, you're editing, like, so
a lot going on.
Yes. On top of working, parenting, starting a business, running a bit, so what's the problem? What's the system? But who are you? Who are you within that system? What's your role in perpetuating the problem or helping to address the problem? And before you can answer that question, you have to know, who are you at your core? What's the most authentic version of you operating in this system, trying to solve this problem?
So so with what you're saying is making so much sense to me. So I teach business classes now. Like I really go into teaching different things. And one of the things that I really focus on, because most people do not understand this, is personality traits. Now, that's the core of who we are in our identity, from what I understand. Our personality traits are what make us up as people. They actually determine how we're going to do things. They determine how we react to stuff, how we respond to things. It determines thought process, everything. Our actual temperaments do all of that. So when you start talking about who we are as a core, I can talk about that piece of it, because there's several different ways that people usually talk about them.
Yeah.
But when you look at it in a scientific way, we have 4 different core personalities that we look at. We have the phlegmatic, we have the choleric, we have the sanguine, and we have the melancholy. Those are the 4 clinical things that we have to look at when it comes to our personality traits.
Okay.
So then when we talk about who we are as a person, what I normally do is I make people take a test to see what their personality traits are and how it affects them in business. So yeah, we can talk about that. That's a wonderful thing because that's your identity of who you are. That's part of it anyway. But you go ahead and talk about your piece of the identity as well.
No, I love it. And I definitely let's unpack that a little bit. Tell us about the 4 different frames of reference, I guess, or levels.
So phlegmatic is a person that is really a laid back person. They work really well under pressure. But when it comes to certain things, they procrastinate. That's their main thing that they do. They're procrastinators. They can't help it. They don't mean to help it, but they will tell you they can get something done. But when it needs to be done, they'll wait until the very last minute and get it done. That's a phlegmatic person, okay? But they love peace. They're the peacemaker of the whole crew. They don't like anybody getting upset. If someone's upset, they try to make peace with everybody so everyone gets along. Let's be friends. That's a phlegmatic person, okay? The sanguine person is the bubbly, happy, oh my God, let's have fun person. And if something goes on, they could be working on something, it could be a serious situation, but if you say squirrel, they have changed their attention to something completely different, and they have moved on to that second thing. It's really not even important, but because it was fun, or because it's something they thought was important, they'll forget the important thing and move to that unimportant thing and go on with that, because that's fun. That's the more important thing to them. Okay. However, there's everyone. When they walk into the room, everyone's drawn to them. Oh my God, did you see Candy? Beautiful. Oh my gosh, she has such a great spirit. They have friends everywhere and everyone loves them because they can charm anyone and they can get anyone to do anything because of their charm. Okay. The melancholy person, melancholy does not mean someone that is sad, okay? It means a person that is moody. They're very moody, but one of the good things about them is that they pay close attention to detail. They're able to really try to get things done. They want it done right. They don't like stuff that is halfway done. If you want someone that is an accountant, they're a melancholy person because they pay attention to the numbers. They love stuff that is systematic. They're really into it. But if something happens and you got to put a monkey wrench in their plans, they have a meltdown. Can't stand it. You cannot make a change with a melancholy person because in their mind, it is going this way and that is the way it's supposed to go. And if it doesn't go that way, we have a problem. So that's a melancholy person. But they are great with numbers. They are very good at getting stuff done. They will plan everything in head. They will have all their systems in place and it'll work out and it'll be beautiful when they're done. Okay, that's how they work. Choleric, which is my
Mm-hmm.
Pray for us is all I'm saying. We're natural born leaders, okay? A choleric person can lead a person into hell. Not trying to be funny. We have the dynamic of understanding when things need to take, we'll take charge of anything. We can make anything happen. We can do anything that you need to have done. We know how to delegate and get everything working, all the systems in place. We can work really well with a melancholy person because we understand that they have the systems and we can tell them we need to get this part done. I need you to go over there and take care of this. We'll talk to the phlegmatic person. Okay, there's a problem right here. I need you to go make peace with that person. They can tell anybody and everything what to do. They can hoard the masses in and make people get stuff done. The problem with people that are choleric is that if you make them mad, everything blows up. Everything blows up. They lose their minds whenever something happens and you make them mad, okay? On top of that, not only do they lose their minds, but if they're leading something and you're trying to deter them from the leadership, they have a meltdown. Can't do that. They don't like change either. Choleric people are very dynamic, very straightforward. They say what's on their mind. They don't mean to hurt people's feelings. People's feelings get so hurt by me all the time. And it's like, look, I'm not trying to hurt your feelings. I'm just telling you the truth. This is what's going on. This is why we got to get this done. We got to take care of this. Listen, I'm not trying to hurt your feelings. And the sanguine person is all on the floor bleeding. You don't mean to hurt their feelings. The melancholy person is crying in the corner. The phlegmatic person has decided to give up and they're just going to procrastinate on every single thing. But you're trying to pull them all together, trying to get them all in the, hurt. It's like herding cats. But when you have a good combination of all of the pieces, because we all have all four temperaments. The problem is that we don't know we have all four of them. We just use them at different times. Now, your main two will always come out. So mine is basically the choleric and the melancholy. I can put a system together and I can lead a person when I need to. But whenever I get upset about something, I will cry. No one knows that I cry. I cry all the time. But I will cry and I will have a meltdown and I will walk away from it because I can't handle it when it gets too much. Now, when my choleric kicks in, it doesn't matter. It's going to get done. One way or another, the job's going to get done. If I can just get 3 people to work with me, if I can get one person to work with me, it's going to get done. So that's how it happens. But those are the 4 major temperaments that we have that creates all of this stuff within us as who we are as a core person. And until you know who you are as a core in your personality traits, it is going to be very hard because I'm telling you, choleric people, when it comes to leadership, they're really good at it, but they make people angry most of the time. So it's really hard to lead people whenever you piss them off. Like, seriously. When it comes to melancholy people, they can lead people, but they can't stand change. So it's really hard. If you when you're in business, you have to be able to know what change is and be able to accept the change. Okay. Sanguine people, if they see a rabbit, I don't care what they have going on, the rabbit is more important than the leadership. So it's really important that they literally understand that they have to stay focused, because if they don't, they will not get anything done. Phlegmatic people, peace is not always going to work things out. You're still going to have to stand up and do certain things that's going to make your business work, because you can be peaceable all the time, but sometimes people take peace as weakness. And you're not being weak. You're just, they think that you are because of your peaceable spirit. So those are the things that we have to work on. But that's my intake on that. Yay.
Oh, I love it. I love it. And it dovetails so perfectly with some of the work that we did. So in the first year, right? So in July, so we would meet in July, November, and May of every year. And it would be July and November in Ohio. And then in May, we would go to one of the other campuses. So we visited the Seattle campus. We did the Los Angeles campus. There's also a New Hampshire and Santa Barbara campus that we didn't get to visit because of the pandemic. But so July, we had our first orientation to the program. We're doing all this reading, helping you really kind of frame this community of practice, this problem you're having. But in November, we did this exercise. And I actually have the visual, so maybe that'll help for our visual learners.
Yes,
right here. So this is it showing up on the screen?
It is now. Yay.
Okay, perfect. So this is an exercise. It's called the Social Identity Map, and it's from the Center for Creative Leadership based here in the States. I think maybe Charlotte or something like that. We did this exercise and it looks, unassuming enough, right? Because, and I'll just kind of break it down and even share my identity as an example. So you're given identity, this outer ring, right? It's almost, you can even almost compare it to your physicality, right? The things people see on the outside. So for me, and I'm taller than I look on Zoom. I'm 5'11", right? So when we meet in person, you don't have to be
like
surprised.
tall people. It's okay with me. I'm tall. They say I'm tall too, you know.
Okay. So these characteristics or keywords, we'll say, these keywords that will go into this outer ring for my given identity will be birth order, height, ethnicity, where I grew up, like those kinds of things. So tall, African American, female, oldest of 2 siblings. So, you know, those are just some basic given characteristics. As we continue with this example, I want to unpack that a little bit further and really connect this research approach that I used for my dissertation. So these are our given identity, right? Things that we're essentially born into. Our chosen identity, these are characteristics that we either consciously or subconsciously choose to affiliate with. So sometimes when I'm working with students, they'll put religion in the given section. But at some point in your life, right, as you develop this level of maturity, you are subconsciously, in some cases, just choosing to maintain that particular religious identity. Does that make sense?
Absolutely, yes. Because that's a choice. That's not something that's given to you.
Exactly. So characteristics or keywords that you might search for, that a person might search for to communicate their chosen identity. You think about your occupation, where you went to school, your relationship status, or your partner, right? So we choose who we're in relationship with. We chose Howard or FAMU. We chose Pensacola State College, right? These are things that we've chosen. Sometimes we've been forced to make these choices, right? But we chose them. Any questions there? Anything bubbling up before I get to this core identity?
No, because you're saying everything that I need to hear. And I'm sorry, I'm trying to play with the light. I see that I'm looking really dark and I wanted to try to light myself up, but it's not working.
Oh, you're good.
Go for it, because I'm telling you, this is super interesting and I'm super excited about it.
Okay, good. And I hope that the listeners and viewers are finding value in this as well. It was the core identity, Catrice. This happened in 2017, November of 2017. So I'm coming up on 6 years ago that I had an experience with this 4-page document. You see these 4 pages that changed everything. So the core identity and what you just shared about the phlegmatic, caloric, sanguine, and what was the last one?
Melancholy.
Melancholy, yes. So what you just shared with those is it gives us more language, right? To really connect to our core identity, like you said. But when we're looking at, or at least the way that I experience this particular exercise, is you think about who you are at your core when you are, even when you're code switching, right? Because sometimes we have to do that to be psychologically safe in an environment, but you're still that person at your core. And sometimes because we're moving so fast, we're overbooked, right? We're busy, we're distracted. We get so disconnected from who we are at our core that when the rubber meets the road, we don't even know who we are. You know what I'm saying?
Yes.
So there are some questions in here, and I can send you the link for this if you think it'll be helpful to post it somewhere. But there are some questions that really help you communicate, like give language to who you are at your core. And what I came to learn and understand about myself in my 30s, in my mid 30s, damn near 40s, right? Was who I am at my core. So from what you're just saying, I think I'm phlegmatic and a little bit of melancholy, right? But
okay,
characteristically, I know that in order for me to self-actualize, right? So getting into the hierarchy of needs, and Maslow's theory of motivation, in order for me to be my very best self, at my core, I need to feel safe. I need to Exactly. And when I don't feel like I'm going to be accepted, then I'm operating at this very, very surface level in my relationships and my interactions with people. And so the way this broke me down was when I could give language to that need for this deep connection, for this deep level of authenticity. I reflected on the relationships that I was in, professional, personal, romantic, right? The ones where I was having the most trouble, where I felt the least fulfilled, was where I was not operating from my core identity. And so
when you say that, what do you mean when you're not operating from your core identity? What exactly does that mean?
So, prime example. So when I would teach, right? So I taught a principles of management class and an entrepreneurship class. And the entrepreneurship class I loved, right? I felt like I could give my all. But that principles of management, I hated teaching that class, first of all.
Why?
A part of why I hated that class was because it was so rigid. It was so regimented. It was like, it has to be chapters 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, and then a test on chapter 5, and then this, that. It was like, where is the opportunity for these students to show up in an authentic way? Because let me tell you, the answers to every quiz and test known to man is somewhere on the internet. So,
that's true, because I'm telling you, we used to do them quizzes and we would go and look them answers up, find the exact answer.
But what that means for students that I was teaching, millennials and Gen Z, right? There was no opportunity for their authentic and core identity to emerge. They were just like, let me give her these right answers that I got from my boy over here so I could get this B and move on to the next thing. And so we're continuing to perpetuate this robotic way that people are moving through life, and further getting them further and further away from who they are at their core.
Okay, that makes sense.
But I didn't have a language for that until I went through this experience myself. But one example that really emerged, to your question about what's an example of me not operating in my core, I realized that I wanted to connect with my students so much. I felt like this was an opportunity, teaching an entrepreneurship class or infusing more creative and innovative ways to teach the management class. It was an opportunity to change the trajectory of their lives, right? So just kind of as a sidebar, when we think about the given identity, we also have to take into consideration the physical environment, because it's literally what you're born into, right?
Right.
So imagine being born into generational poverty because of where your parents and grandparents have lived. Imagine how that impacts how you see the world. Imagine how that makes you, like, if your lived experience is based in scarcity mindset. Imagine if, because of scarcity mindset, your risk propensity, you're less likely to take risks. Now, you compound all of that with, here come this woman trying to get me to understand my core identity. It's threatening to someone. Like, this is my place of comfort, right? And I'm just here for the degree, Miss White. Just give me my B so I can get on to the next class. You want me to know who I am? I'm only 19. I don't need to figure that out right now. So this is what's happening in these classrooms, where at the same time I'm learning about the Rockefeller family, the Walton family, the Vanderbilt family, how their family wealth, first of all, was built on our backs, but how we haven't been enfranchised enough to build it for ourselves. And so all of this is happening while I'm while I'm in this PhD program, going from this very intentional program around leadership and systemic change into a space where people are so cemented by their lived experiences that comfort is the place that they exist. And that's when everything, it rocked my world, because I'm like, I'm in the wrong, I've been here for 9, at the time, it was maybe 7 or 8 years. I've been in this space for 7 or 8 years, and I'm not supposed to be here. It's not the work I'm supposed to be doing.
So you changed your whole thing because, wow. That's okay. So let me interject something, because while you were talking, I've been really thinking about us as a people. And one of the things that I can honestly tell you is that even though when we get into school, we kind of lock down and stay in our comfort zone, when we're in peer-to-peer relationships like boyfriend and girlfriend or friend to friend, we show our vulnerabilities. Like I've had several female friends that would tell me, I grew up poor, and they tell you their whole story. But when it comes to being in school, because of the whole idea of us not being allowed to really share who we are, because we came from the public school where the white teachers didn't really want us to say anything, or they didn't care about the background that we had, or we were troublesome because of this, or they don't know how to learn, or blah blah blah. We trained ourselves to switch that whole thing off. So when you get back into school, college, it's really hard to change that thinking, because everyone in school was against you from kindergarten all the way up to 12th grade. So that's a hard mindset to change. So now you're saying that we have to go back in, and when we look at school, look at it in a different aspect and be willing to be vulnerable so that you can get what you need to get out of it. Is that correct?
And such a valid point that you made to, and this is where lived experience comes into play, and we don't give enough credit, right? So this is where this whole equity argument and debate comes into play. It's really about what's been my experience that brought me to this part of the game where maybe I'm behind the 8 ball. The argument for equity is really about acknowledging the human experience that's different from your own.
Wow. And we've got so many of those. I mean, when you look at, so going back to what you were saying about the Rockefellers and all this stuff, and let's talk about Reconstruction for a minute, because that is, I talk about this all the time, and people really don't know how much I really know when it comes to all the stuff that happened. But everything that's happened to us as a people, from us getting over here to being freed, to being put basically back into mental slavery, because that's what it really is, mental slavery. When you look at all the stuff that happened concerning us, it was always written down that this would be the case. It was always a known fact that this would be the case for us as a people. And so now the question becomes in our identity. So let's go into business part of it, right? Because the identity has always been for us as a people to get just enough or under enough of what we're supposed to have, so that we can feel like we've gotten to a certain level, but we really haven't. So how do we change that whole process of our identity right now, is my question.
So a part of the work that I do, again, as a systems thinker and as a change strategist, I do specifically focus on wealth building and wealth transfer for Black and other marginalized ethnic groups, right? So that's the context that I work in. But a part of the way that I do that with my clients, predominantly white institutions or white-led organizations that are providing business development services, is we have to tell our story. And it has to be from the perspective of providing the evidence. So, for example, when I was a keynote speaker at University of Buffalo, and we were going into this technology pitch competition. There were a handful of students from marginalized communities, Black, Hispanic, but the majority of the audience was white. So I give the historical context because that's what we're missing. Sometimes we don't know what has happened to us, to our ancestors, to our elders, that impacts the way we have moved through the world. And because it becomes so deeply embedded, like in our self-conscious, that we need someone to help us pull it out, to have the language for it. So one of the things that we have to do in order to shift that paradigm, or the better language that I tend to use, is claim our identity, because a lot of time we've just been, people tell us who we are and we just accept it, right?
Exactly.
These laws tell us who we are and we just accept it, but without having the narrative, the ancestral narrative, and the documentation on who we are. I have a book in my car, the African American Encyclopedia of Business History. And in the foreword, it tells you they are providing business profiles, the biographical sketches of business owners, Black and African American business owners from the 1600s. So you can't tell me that this whole Black entrepreneurship thing is only 20, 30, 40 years old, when there's documented proof of the work that we did as business owners and entrepreneurs from the 1600s. That's what I mean about claiming our identity instead of just accepting what someone has constructed for us.
And that's why I have a problem with what's going on in the state of Florida right now, with that whole conversation that we learned from slavery. No, we taught from slavery. Even the way we built homes and stuff like that, we taught them how to do certain things. So don't tell me that we learned. You learned. Don't tell me I learned. So
that's such a debacle. It's just like
that's a DeSantis moment for sure. But we won't talk about him anymore because I don't like him. So now going back to the historical part of it, because I think that's very prominent piece. One of the things that I would, so let me tell you what I did, because I had to find out who I was in order for me to move forward. That was one of the things that I have been struggling with. And when I moved to Florida, I was born and raised in Connecticut, but when I moved to Florida, my family is from here. I have family all over Pensacola. They don't even know that I'm related to them, which is fine. I don't want them to know that I'm related to them, honestly. And it's not because, I don't want to be connected to them. It's just that I would prefer not to be, known for that. But my family was completely constructed here. My grandfather came from Alabama, but my grandmother, her whole family is here. Okay. And so I took it upon myself to go to the library, the genealogy library here in Pensacola. And it was on 9th Avenue at the time. And I went and I dug up all the history of my family. Took me all the way back to Africa, but I found out who my family was and why they were here and what they did in the community and all the things that they did for success. And it blew my mind when I saw my relatives and all the people that was in my family on my grandfather's side. And then I had a book from my grandmother's side, and I saw all the things that was great within the whole thing. So I turned all of my research into the library. So we have a book now in the library for my family history. Now, most people will not take the time to do this because it took me about 7 years to pull all the information together. But if you really want to find out who you are and why you are and all the history behind what you do and why you do what you do. Because especially if you're an entrepreneur, my grandfather could not read. He had a 3rd grade education. He could not read. Okay. And he was raised in the fields, but he had the sharpest business mind I had ever seen in anybody's life. Like, seriously. And so my great grandmother, which was his father, was a what was it? She was she helped deliver children. And so with her doing that, she made money from doing that. So she was a businesswoman. So all the things that happened shows me who I am as a person. But if we don't take the time to go back and see why we do what we do, or why we have a mind for business, or why we always thinking about moving forward, it comes from your history line. It really does. So I would strongly suggest going to the Pensacola or to any library and start looking up your genealogy to find out who you are and why. Because it's there. We just didn't know it was there, and no one takes time to tell us that it's there.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I love that. So part of kind of along those same lines, I was planning, I actually hosted this past summer, the Dynastic Wealth Family Retreat. So, and we hadn't really unpacked dynastic wealth for real, but we will do that. But one of the findings, or one of the things that I uncovered, because I didn't write about it in my dissertation, I'm like, I got to get finished. I can't go down this rabbit hole. One of the things that I discovered and have kind of designed a model specifically for the Black experience, well, I don't know about you, but my family has a family reunion every other year, right? So
we
look
tried.
At that face.
We tried, but I'm gonna tell you that anyway. Go for it. I have nightmares about that now. So.
But listen, so just like, there's a planning committee and somebody calling you about your t-shirt money and are you coming to the scholarship banquet, our high net worth, our ultra high net worth counterparts, for one thing, they're not thinking about generational wealth. That's not a term that they use. And the other thing is they are not planning no family reunions. These families have family retreats. This is where, because they also have real estate, right? And they have these legal vehicles to protect their assets, their family trust. These families will convene and gather at the family home and will essentially have like a 3 or 4 day business meeting where every generation in the family is involved in some way, shape, or form. So one part of the Dynastic Wealth Family Retreat was where I essentially provided examples. I hosted this ambassador training for people who wanted to become that beacon in their own families and really kind of build out their family's dynastic wealth, their family's trust in governing documents, right? So a part of that is genealogy. Like, we have to know who we are and where we come from. And to your point that you were discussing about the research that you did, in my dissertation, I use this method called phenomenology. And phenomenology is the study of the lived experience. So you are a phenomenologist, Catrice. Okay. It's the study of the lived experience of any group of people who have some shared experience of a phenomenon. So for me, the phenomenon was being a first generation Black entrepreneur. For you, that phenomenon was being a descendant, right? Or a relative of this particular matriarch or patriarch. So yay, phenomenologist.
Love that. I'm going to keep saying that I'm a phenomenal. Look, the word phenomenal is in there, so I love it.
Right.
Right. Okay. So dealing with the core, there's so many things that we need to unpack with this. We need to have more discussions about this, because I'm telling you, when it comes to how we think as a people, this whole thing shows why we're a step behind. Mm-hmm. Seriously. Mm-hmm. So we've got to kind of pull that towards something that will help us move forward. And one of the things that we do with Bantu Cola is we talk about many tribes, one nation. And that is a big thing for us, so that people can understand that even though we have different tribes and different cultures and different things, we're still one group of people that need to work together as a whole.
Right.
So I'm going to say this: if you have any thoughts concerning identity and you've watched this video and you would like very much to learn more about what we're talking about when it comes to this, please, 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 please take time to contact Dr. White. I'm telling you, she has something that we all need to learn from. And it is important that we get this down, because we're doing better, but we're still a step behind as a people when it comes to entrepreneurship and business ownership. So if you're interested and you'd like to learn more about what she has to offer concerning our identities and helping you with your wealth path, talk to her. Give us your information, Dr. White.
So I can be reached. Email is easiest. I'm LaTanya at meetdrwhite.com. Or if you go to meetdrwhite.com, you should see the link where you could just schedule like an appointment, right? No cost. This is really how I consider the tithe, to share these talents and gifts. So meetdrwhite.com or Meet Dr. White on all social platforms.
Awesome. So, okay. So with that being said, then our next conversation, because we just went down one complete passage, and we broke it down just enough for everyone to get some information. So on our next conversation, tell us what we're going to be discussing, because I'd like to know more.
Yeah, for sure. So just for context again, because I'm a social scientist, we talk a lot about technical assistance, your branding, your pricing, your profit strategy, and things of that nature. Our discussion today was really around mindset. That's something that your technical assistance providers, your SBDCs, they don't always have the bandwidth or the expertise to do. So this is just a little bit about mindset. When we reconnect in, I think, a month or so, our next discussion is going to go a little bit more down this path around technical assistance. So if you can see the image behind me, and maybe it'll make sense if I share it with you, Catrice, to post it as well.
Yes.
We'll be focusing on financial wealth as a part of the dynastic wealth building strategy.
Good. This is good stuff. Good. So you're the third financial specialist I've had online, but what you have to bring to it is so much more when it comes to like the historical piece of it and the educational piece of it. So I'm super excited. Guys, please come back and take a look at what's being offered. Again, this is free information. She just wants to help you. So this is important that you get this information so that you can really kind of pull it all together and understand how you can be better as an entrepreneur, for sure. So thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. I always enjoy our connection, so I appreciate you bringing me into your universe, Catrice.
Yay! Likewise, girl. I'm gonna tell you, this is one of the best connections I've ever made. So I really appreciate you. So with that being said, have a good day, and we'll talk soon.
All righty. Bye.